Have you ever noticed how quickly we can forget the good things God has done? Psalm 78 is a powerful, sobering, and hope-filled chapter that warns us not to repeat the mistakes of the past. It is a song of Asaph filled with history, miracles, warnings, and promises that calls us to remember God's mighty works and remain faithful. In this deep dive, we'll unpack the history behind the psalm, uncover fascinating biblical facts, and discover what it means for us today. Psalm 78 is one of the longest psalms, with 72 verses. It's a teaching psalm meant to be passed down to future generations. Asaph, the Levite musician appointed by King David, uses it to tell Israel's story, from the exodus out of Egypt to the leadership of David. It's not just history, it's a call to remember. The structure of the psalm moves from praise to warning, from miracle to rebellion, from judgment to mercy. The message is clear. If we forget what God has done, we are likely to turn away from Him. The call to teach. The psalm opens with an urgent command. Give ear, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. Asaph speaks in parables and dark sayings of old meaning stories, rich with meaning, handed down from the past. This is a biblical principle. Faith must be taught and remembered. One of the most overlooked facts here is that in Jewish tradition, parents were the primary faith teachers, not priests alone. Forgetting God starts in the home when we stop talking about His works. Psalm 78 is like a spiritual history class with a divine purpose to protect the future by remembering the past. The great works of God. Asaph recounts the miracles of the Exodus, the parting of the Red Sea, the water from the rock, manna from heaven, and God's constant provision. Every act of deliverance was proof of His covenant love. Historically, manna was such a miraculous event that later Jewish writers called it bread of angels. The psalm reminds us that God's wonders were not occasional, they were continuous. But despite all this, Israel still rebelled. Here lies a lesson. Miracles alone do not keep faith alive. A willing heart does. The tragedy of forgetfulness. One of the most sobering facts in Psalm 78 is how quickly the people forgot. Even after seeing the plagues in Egypt and walking through the Red Sea, they doubted God's goodness. Asaph highlights their complaints, their testing of God in the wilderness, and their Biblically, forgetfulness is not just mental, it is spiritual. It leads to distrust, disobedience, and idolatry. This section reminds us that spiritual memory is a safeguard for faith, God's judgment and mercy. God's patience has limits. And Psalm 78 shows that He allowed judgment to fall through plagues, enemy attacks, and exile. But it also reveals His mercy. Even after Israel's repeated rebellion, God forgave and restored. A fascinating detail is that God chose Judah, not Ephraim, to lead His people, a decision that would shape Israel's destiny and bring forth King David, the shepherd king. This shows us that God's plans are not based on human strength, but on His divine choice. The rise of David. The psalm ends with hope. God chose David, a shepherd boy, and brought him to lead His people with integrity and skill. Historically, David was not just a political leader but also a worshiper, uniting the nation around God's presence. This ending is a reminder that God can raise up faithful leaders in the midst of a faithless generation. Life applications. Psalm 78 calls us to remember, to teach, and to stay faithful. It tells us to rehearse God's works regularly, especially with the next generation. For Christians today, this means sharing testimonies, studying Scripture, and living out God's truth in daily life. One striking takeaway is that history with God is not just something to know, it's something to live. If Psalm 78 teaches us anything, it's this. Spiritual amnesia is dangerous. But remembering God's works keeps faith alive. Take time today to recall what He has done for you, share it with someone, and live in gratitude.